Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a comparison video for you. Today I want to ask which is the best everyday carry Benchmade, and these are the two Benchmades that I would recommend the most to most people, okay? Now, let me qualify this with a couple of little things here before we get into it so that I don't get a bunch of comments making these points. Anyway, the first one is, if you like larger, more tactical knives, yeah, the Contigo or the Crooked River would probably be more your style. If you like much smaller knives, then yeah, the Mini Grip or the Mini Freek or the Valet or something like that may be more in your size range. However, the sort of sweet spot for EDC knives is kind of that 8 to 8.5 inch range, and both of these fall nicely in that range. Both of these are clearly designed to be broadly appealing as EDC knives, and so these are the two Benchmades we're going to look at, and probably some of the stuff that we'll say would translate to the Mini Freek and the Mini Griptilian, but not all of it. The other thing I have to say before we get into our comparison, actually there's two other things I have to say. The first one is, I'm sure some of you watching will say, Kevin, you should be using the standard version of the Griptilian, the FRN version, and you're not. And I would, okay, fine. If I was doing that though, I would right away say, just get the Freek. It feels way better in hand. The blades would be, again, the Freek would be a more dominant knife in that comparison as far as I'm concerned. The other thing I have to say here is Benchmade has completely thrown a wrench in the works of this video by just the other day pointing out that they're going to be releasing for 2019 a G10 and M4 version of the Freek. Somewhat similar in construction to what they've done here, only way cooler because it's going to be orange and gray with a black blade. Really, really awesome looking knife. You can take a look at it there now. When that knife comes out and when I get it in hand, which will be, as soon as I can, I will remake this video and do the comparison between those two knives. So in the meantime, this is what we've got to look at, and this is what we're going to be dealing with. And I'm 2 minutes in and I haven't even started. So hold on, guys. Here we go. I hope you have a coffee and you can take a few minutes to enjoy this video. First off, let's point out that these do cost different amounts. This is $179, but I think there are significant reasons for the price difference. This is 110, but we've got 20 CV steel over here. We've got, G10, and if you compare this to the Freek that's going to come out, I think it retails for 190. So, they're much more comparable in terms of price range. By the way, they're probably more comparable in terms of steel performance. I don't know. M4 is a good steel, but these are both really, really great steels. So I'm not going to get too much into that until we actually have the M4 Freek in front of us for that other video. All right, so price difference aside, let's go ahead and do this comparison. The Freek is a little larger, which does nose it slightly ahead in my book. It weighs a little bit less. It's just under 4 ounces. This is just over 4 ounces. It's not a huge difference. This guy is 8.5 inches, 8 7/16. This guy is just over 8 inches at like 8 1/8 or so. The blade length on this is just under 3.5 inches. The blade length on this is just over 3.5 inches. Okay, so there's a lot of very, very close comparisons. In pocket, you can see that the Freek is going to be a little bit bigger. And if we flip these guys over, we're talking about size, weight, and carry now. You can see that the deep carry clip on the grip is going to make it carry a little deeper. Although that's a really I don't know. I don't even know if I should bring that up, because anyone who wants to, if you own a Freek or if you own a Griptilian, you can email Benchmade and they will send you whatever clip you want. Okay, and actually I would like to put on both of these knives the short clip that comes off the Benchmade bug out. I love that little clip, and I would put that on all my Benchmades. All right, so that stuff out of the way, I have to give points for, in terms of how these carry in pocket. The Freek is better in terms of lightweight. You really don't notice the Freek in your pocket. The Griptilian, though, is better in terms of extracting from the pocket. The G10 is a little smoother, and it does go in and out of pocket a little easier. So it depends on what you're looking for. The rubber on the Freek that's the biggest limitation on the Freek. That does tie it up just a little bit. Now, both of these knives, when I'm carrying them, when I'm using them, by the way, huge thank you to Bradley, Ontario Knives on Instagram, or anyway, something like Ontario Knives. I'll put a link in the description box below. thanks for sending this along. I have been able to use and carry these like in the same time, you know, switch them out from over the every half hour for a couple of days. And so that's been really, really helpful in doing this comparison. And that's because Bradley, a friend of mine, was willing to lend me this guy for this video. Okay, size, weight, and carry, they're very, very close. I will say this, the Griptilian is a slightly more compact package, which does make it a little smaller in pocket, and it goes in and out of pocket a little easier. So I think for, you know, for the sake of objectivity, we have to give the points to the Griptilian in terms of how easy it carries and how lightweight it is when you're carrying it. Moving on to the blade. The blades here are quite a bit different in terms of look and design. By the way, there is a drop point version of this blade available. However, while they look quite a bit different, in terms of how these actually perform, they are very close, and you would be hard pressed, okay, to tell the difference. If I kind of put I don't know, you know, if I put a toilet paper tube or something around both of these handles so you couldn't feel the handle and you had to tell which was which by cutting stuff with the blade, good luck. Okay, they're very, very close. Now, I will say this, the steel on the Griptilian is considerably, I don't know about considerably better, but it is a better steel. 20 CV is, you know, a fantastic steel, highly corrosion resistant, very tough, holds an edge. It's a fantastic steel. It really is. S30V has great performance, great resistance to rusting, but it's going to be a little tougher to sharpen. And that's, I think, the biggest complaint about S30V is, yeah, it yields great performance. It can be, I should say, a little chippy. I've never had a problem with it. It can also be a little harder to sharpen. So, I don't know, but 20 CV can be the same. So, these are very, very close. Let's just say this, 20 CV is going to edge out S30V by a very small margin, but there would be very few people with very few philosophies of use. You know, Cedric and Ada, Gear and Outdoors, who's doing all this testing and cutting, he could probably tell the difference between these two knives. The average knife user would never, ever tell the difference, all right? So, how do the blades compare? Well, guess what? I like the grind on the Freek better, and I like the blade shape better. However, I like the steel on the Griptilian better, and categorically, it is a better performance steel. So you've got to kind of, you know, how do those two kind of play out in your mind and your preference? I don't really know. I'm going to say the Griptilian takes this one for the type of steel it has. 20 CV is definitely, you know, categorically a better steel than S30V. I know you'll probably want to argue with me in the comments below, but for the sake of generosity, let's give the edge to the steel on the Griptilian. All right, so far the Griptilian is coming out ahead. It wins in terms of size, weight, and carry. It wins in terms of blade. The axis locks on these are the same, okay? The action is good. I will say this, if you are buying Benchmades, the only issue I have with this one is the detent is a little soft. The Omega springs here may not be quite as stiff as the Omega springs on this one. I get just a little more detent here, which makes it a little easier to build some pressure behind the blade. But who's to say that if I had a different Griptilian, I wouldn't have that same thing? So the action on these are a tie. They're both very good. They're both easily accessible. They both flip really well. They're both very smooth. And I have to say this about both of these knives. You know, when people talk with me about bearings versus washers, I generally say I prefer well done washers. All right, this is smooth as can be, right? It is really, really nice. Again, this is smooth as can be. It is really, really nice. Is it smooth? Is it as smooth as, you know, ceramic bearings? Pretty well, right? And a well dialed in, closely controlled, if you will, you know, a phosphor-bronze washer knife with very good tolerances can be just about as good as ceramic bearings, and you don't have the issue of maintenance that the bearings bring in. So generally speaking, for the average person, right, unless you're, you know, the type of guy who really only cares about the action, if you're looking for a cutting tool that's going to perform really well, you should be preferring bearings. I mean, wow, you should be preferring washers over bearings because they are, in terms of performance, definitely better. All right, that's a little extra aside for this video, but that is one of those things that a number of you have pointed out in various videos. I'm not against bearings. I have lots of knives with bearings, and I've never really had a big problem keeping them clean, but certainly in theory, that could be a problem. Dusting, dirt, and grime can get in bearings and cause more problems than they can in washers, no doubt. Okay, so axis lock is great on both of these knives, and I took way too long just to say that, but here we are. What about the handle? Well, here's where you're going to see probably the biggest difference, okay? The Griptilian handle, to me, still feels cramped. Now, it feels, with the G10, it feels 10 times better. The biggest issue I had with the standard Griptilian is, in addition to my hand feeling like I didn't quite have enough space, all right, I also felt like I was holding this cheap kid's toy instead of holding a you know, highly functional cutting tool, right? With the Freek, they have fixed the cheap feeling by putting this overmolded rubber coating on here, which, you know, is fine, and it's very, very comfortable in hand. And here's where I think the Freek really does win. In terms of comfort in hand, the Freek is definitely a little bit better, okay? And it's noticeably different. You can really, at least for someone with my hand size and anyone with larger hands, you're gonna right away notice that difference in real estate on the Benchmade Freek as compared to the Griptilian. And so in that category, in terms of comfort, the Freek definitely takes it. However, in terms of construction, you gotta give credit to the Griptilian again. So the Griptilian with the G10 is definitely more robust and way better built than the Freek, and more confidence inspiring as well. Now, if we took this down to a standard Griptilian, yeah, I wouldn't be able to say that at all. The standard Griptilian is basically the same, and, you know, feels even worse because of the lack of rubber. Or maybe it's because, so on the Freek, there seems to be a little more in terms of internal structure. Now, I think I can, let's see. Yeah, you can see, I can get a little bit of movement there. But when you're holding it in hand, and even when you're performing various cutting tasks, it doesn't feel as sort of cheap and plasticky as the Griptilian does. Not this Griptilian, by the way. Notice I can't get any movement out of this. This is rock solid. And when you're cutting something with this, it is very confidence inspiring. Okay, so in terms of construction, yeah, no question the G10 Griptilian takes it. In terms of comfort, the Freek takes it pretty easily. Okay, so what is my overall thought on these two knives? Well, they're both fantastic knives. And honestly, if I were, you know, if someone called me or messaged me, which people regularly do, and said, hey, I'm looking at these two knives, which one should I buy? I would probably say for most people, look, they are very close. You need to get them both in hand and give them a try, right? Go to a brick and mortar store. Now, I almost hate to say this, but I know that the big box stores charge sometimes some higher prices, especially in Canada. Now, in the US, I think, now, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but is it right to say that in the US, if you walk into a Bass Pro Shop or go to Blade HQ, the Griptilian is going to be the same price? Someone, you know, who lives in the States and can tell me that, please comment down below. But in Canada, that's not true, right? You can find these online, even on Amazon.ca, for quite a bit cheaper than you're going to pay in a big box store. So here's what I would say. If I was going to buy one of these, if I was seriously considering, I would go to my local Bass Pro or Dick's Sporting Goods or, you know, Cabela's or whatever, get my hands on both of these knives and take some time to feel them out. You may want to buy it there, you know, if you have that impulse buy, you know, temptation that you just can't overcome. I get it. But what I would be inclined to do is get them in hand, play with them, spend a little bit of time, and then say to the person who helped you, thanks a lot. You know, I'll buy this toque or I'll buy this cap so that I've totally wasted your time. And then go home, find your favorite website and order from there. All right. Now, the other thing I have to say about that is because of Benchmade's struggles with quality control over the last few years. Now, I will submit to you that I think that's handled. All right, I haven't seen anyone talking about new Benchmades having some of the issues that we used to see with Benchmade. And so I think if you're buying one these days, it's probably not much of a concern, except for this one thing. If you're buying online, you could be buying a knife that's been sitting on their shelf for 3 or 4 years from back in the day when Benchmade did seem to struggle a little bit with getting things, you know, getting blade grinds even and getting centering on point and those kinds of things. All right. And by the way, both of these are at the price point where I feel like centering needs to be good. Anyway, having said all of that, you know, my conclusion is for me and for my preferences, now I'm gonna, you know, I can be a little subjective. Now that I've told you, look, the Griptilian is categorically better in most ways. For me though, in my preferences, I would absolutely take the Freek. However, I know for my friend Bradley and his preferences, he would pretty strongly favor the Griptilian. All right, and I'm sure there'll be people like that out there. I like the size on the Freek. I like the blade shape on the Freek a little bit better. And I look forward to, and I'm actually pretty excited about getting to handle the new version of the Freek with the G10 and M4 steel. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this comparison down below. Which one do you own? Which one do you prefer? I think there's a lot of room for varied opinion on this, so I look forward to a good discussion down below. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to go over to White Mountain Knives and use my discount code SHARPSTUFF. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.